There is a letter written in Paris in 1671 that begins with a sentence no parent has ever fully recovered from reading. I cannot describe to you the state I am in. I search for my daughter everywhere, and I find only her absence. The woman who wrote it was Marie de Raboutin Chantal, Marquise de Sévigné. Her daughter, Françoise, had just left Paris for the south of France, where her husband had been appointed governor of Provence. The separation was permanent, not in the sense of death, but in the sense that the life they had shared in the same city, in daily proximity, in the continuous texture of each other's presence, was over. The daughter had built a life that required her to be elsewhere, and the mother, sitting in her Paris apartment with the pen in her hand, was discovering that love and loss can arrive in the same moment, and that the one does not diminish the other. She wrote letters. For the next 25 years, until her death in 1696, she wrote letters to her daughter, nearly 1,000 of them survive, that constitute the most intimate, most honest, most philosophically searching record of the interior life of a woman in the 17th century that exists anywhere in the literature of the world. They are also, if you read them with full attention, one of the most searching explorations available of a question that the culture of attachment and intimacy that we live in has mostly stopped asking. At what point does love stop being the thing that makes us more fully ourselves and begin being the thing that makes us less? There is a particular form of love that the self-help culture celebrates, and the psychological literature has somewhat uneasily begun to call enmeshment. Not the dramatic, abusive kind, the kind that wears the face of devotion. The parent whose sense of well-being depends so completely on the child's condition that the child cannot have a difficult week without the parent having a difficult week, and the parent's difficulty becomes a weight the child carries alongside their own. The partner whose love is expressed primarily as surveillance, who needs to know where you are, not from control, but from the anxiety of absence, the specific, unbearable quality of the not knowing that real closeness, when it has reached this point, produces. The friend whose care has become a kind of possession, who cannot celebrate your independence from them because your independence from them is experienced as a threat to the love itself. These people are not villains. They are often among the most loving people available. What they have not found is the specific, difficult, counterintuitive wisdom that Madame de Sévigné spent 25 years of correspondence working toward, and that she stated more directly in her letters than most people manage in their entire interior lives. She wrote, "I find that distance teaches me things about my love that proximity concealed, that the missing sharpens what the having had blurred, that what I love in her I can now see more clearly than when she was here, because when she was here the love was so immediate that I could not distinguish it from myself." Distance, she discovered, is not the enemy of love. It is sometimes the condition under which love finally becomes visible as its own thing, separate from the self that loves, capable of existing without the beloved's continuous proximity, genuinely about the other rather than about the lover's need for the other. Marie de Raboutin de Chantal was born in Paris in 1626, the daughter of a minor noble family. She lost both parents early. Her father died before she was 2, her mother when she was 6, and was raised by her uncle, the Abbé de Coulanges, in a household that took her education seriously in the way that few 17th century households took the education of women seriously. She was intelligent, well-read, witty, and socially gifted. She married Henri de Sévigné in 1644 and had 2 children. Françoise, the daughter, and Charles, the son. Henri died in a duel in 1651, leaving her a widow at 25. She never remarried. She became instead one of the most admired women in the salon culture of Paris, a regular at the Hôtel de Rambouillet, the intellectual and social world that organized Parisian life in the mid-17th century. moving in the company of La Rochefoucauld, Cardinal de Retz, Madame de Lafayette. Her daughter, Françoise, was, from early in her childhood, the center of her emotional world in a way that her son never quite was. The relationship between them, intensely close, mutually devoted, occasionally smothering, is the subject of the correspondence in its deepest sense. Not background, foreground, the thing the letters were for. When Françoise married the Comte de Grignon in 1669 and moved south, the separation that followed revealed both the depth of the devotion and its cost. Sévigné wrote with a hunger that was not always comfortable to read. She counted the weeks until the next visit. She catalogued her daughter's absences the way an accountant catalogues losses. She sent, along with the wit and the gossip and the extraordinary literary quality of the letters, a sometimes barely contained desperation, the specific desperation of a person who has organized their interior life around a center that has moved beyond reach.
But something else also happened in those letters. Something that a person less honest and less linguistically gifted than Sévigné might not have been able to see or say. She began to examine the love itself, not just to express it, but to look at it, to turn it over in her hands, to ask what exactly she was loving when she loved her daughter. Whether the love she was describing was for Françoise or for the version of Françoise she needed Françoise to be. Whether the grief of the separation was the grief of missing her daughter or the grief of a self that had, without fully intending to, made another person's presence the condition of its own coherence. She did not arrive at clean answers. The letters do not resolve into a philosophy of healthy attachment. They are too honest for that. But they arrive, slowly, at something more valuable than a clean answer. They arrive at the honest articulation of the question, and at a quality of relationship with the daughter across the distance that the proximity had been, she eventually understood, preventing. The philosophy in the letters. 3 recognitions, arrived at over 25 years, that constitute Sévigné's wisdom on the relationship between love and the self. The first recognition, love can become a way of not being yourself. Sévigné writes, in one of her most candid moments, "I ask myself sometimes whether I am loving her or losing myself, and I am not sure the two are different things." This is the recognition that the psychological literature took 300 more years to systematize, but that Sévigné felt in her body from the first winter of the separation. The love that has become the primary source of the self's coherence, the relationship without which the self does not know who it is, has crossed a line. Not the line between love and obsession, which is a dramatic line that most people can recognize from outside themselves, a quieter line. The line between loving someone and using someone, using their presence, their needs, their continued requirement of you as the primary substance of the self. She observed in herself with the specific, painful honesty of the first-rate intelligence she had that her need for her daughter was not separable from her daughter's needs from her, that she had arranged the relationship subtly and without intending to, so that her own importance to Françoise was a primary source of her sense of her own significance. The needed mother, the irreplaceable correspondent, the one whose letters Françoise could not do without. These were not simply expressions of love, they were the architecture of a self that had made itself out of being necessary to someone else. The second recognition. Distance reveals what proximity had been hiding. This is the more surprising and more philosophically unusual observation in the correspondence, the one that has made Sévigné important to readers who are not primarily interested in 17th century French culture. She writes, "I discover things in her letters that I did not know were in her. When I could see her face, I saw what I expected. The letters show me what she actually thinks." The proximity that felt like intimacy had been, in some ways, a substitute for it.
The constant sharing of space had made attention lazy. They knew each other's expressions, habits, rhythms, and had stopped needing to read what those expressions actually contained. The distance forced a quality of attention, the careful reading of each letter, the inferring of tone and feeling from words alone, the genuine effort to imagine the other person's actual interior rather than the familiar surface, that the daily presence had been allowing them to skip. This is a distinction worth sitting with. The intimacy that exists in proximity, the sharing of daily life, the taken-for-granted familiarity, the comfort of not having to explain yourself, is real and valuable. It is also capable of becoming a substitute for a deeper and more demanding kind of knowing. The knowing that requires actual attention. The knowing that the letters produced precisely because they had nothing else to work with. The third recognition. The love that survives distance is the love that was really there. This is Sévigné's most difficult conclusion because it runs against everything the culture of attachment says about how love should feel. She writes, "I loved her more when she was here, but I knew my love better when she was gone." The love that depended on the daughter's presence, the immediate, warm, overwhelming devotion of the Paris years, was real. And it contained, mixed into it, things that were not love, the need to be needed, the self-definition through the relationship, the anxiety of the self that has made another person its ground. These are not shameful things, they are human things, but they are not exactly love in the purer sense that the distance eventually clarified. What remained after 3 months of letters, 6 months, a year, the specific quality of care that persisted even in the absence of the presence, even when there was nothing for it to do except exist, this was what Sévigné eventually identified as the actual love, the love that did not need the beloved to be present in order to be itself. The love that was genuinely about Françoise rather than about the self's need of Françoise.
Now the bridge. Because Sévigné was a 17th century French aristocrat writing letters to her daughter in Provence, and most people watching this video are not navigating that world. But here is what has not changed in 350 years. The relationship you are in, or have been in, or are building, where the love and the need have become difficult to distinguish. The parent and the adult child, where the boundary between loving support and the need to remain essential has blurred. The partnership where one person's sense of themselves has become so dependent on the other's continuous presence and approval that their good days and bad days are not really their own anymore. The friendship where the closeness has tipped into something that feels, sometimes, more like possession than like care. Sévigné is not prescribing distance. She is not recommending that we love from further away as a strategy for loving better. She is describing what she discovered in the distance that was forced upon her, and what that discovery revealed about what she had and had not been doing in the proximity. The question she is ultimately asking is one that most people in close relationships are not in the habit of asking. Is this love I am expressing, or is this love I am using? Is my care for this person organized around their genuine good and their genuine freedom, including their freedom to be fine without me? Or is some part of it organized around my own need for their need of me? These are not comfortable questions. Sévigné sat with them for 25 years and did not reach clean answers. But the sitting, the honest, unglamorous, ongoing examination of what was happening inside the love she was expressing is what made the correspondence what it is. Not just letters from a devoted mother, a record of a person trying, with unusual honesty, to love someone well. Here is what Madame de Sévigné asks of you practically today. First, identify the relationship where the love and the need are hardest to distinguish. Not to feel shame about the need, to see it clearly. The person in your life whose well-being you track so closely that their difficult week automatically becomes your difficult week. not because their difficulty is contagious, but because you have organized your inner life around their state. The relationship where your own sense of okayness depends, more than you would publicly admit, on their continued requirement of you. Name the relationship, not to withdraw from it, to see it with the honest quality of attention that Sévigné brought to hers in the forced clarity of the letters. What is the love in this relationship? And what is the need that has woven itself into the love?
Second, practice the love that does not require the other's proximity to exist. This is Sévigné's most practically available instruction and her most demanding one. Find one moment today in an existing close relationship in which you practice the love that does not need to perform itself, does not need to be received, does not need to produce the response that confirms you are loved in return. The phone call that is genuinely about them rather than about your need to know they are all right. The message sent without the monitoring of when it is read. The support offered without the tracking of whether it is adequately appreciated. The love that gives without needing to witness the giving's effect. This is harder than it sounds. The Sévigné love, the love that finally became visible in the distance, is the love that is genuinely for the other rather than primarily for the self that loves. It is not common. It can be cultivated. Third, ask what the relationship looks like from the other person's side. Sévigné eventually came to understand, with the specific discomfort of a person of genuine intelligence looking at something they would rather not see, that her need of her daughter was sometimes a weight her daughter carried, that the letters that were an expression of love were also occasionally an expression of a claim, that the devotion that felt from the inside like pure giving was, from the outside, sometimes experienced as a demand. Take one close relationship. Sit with it from the other person's perspective, not to judge yourself, to see. What does your love look like from inside it? Is the other person free in this relationship to be absent without guilt, to be fine without you, to move toward their own life without the sense that the movement is a loss you are absorbing? Or has the love created, gently, without any intention of doing so, a structure in which their freedom is partially conditioned on managing your feelings about it? Fourth, write the letter. Not necessarily to send, the Sévigné practice translated into the available form. Write to someone you love, in a form you will not necessarily share, the honest account of what the love actually is. Not the public performed version, the version that includes the need alongside the devotion, the fear alongside the care, the specific, human, not fully admirable truth of what you feel alongside the elevated version you would rather be expressing. Not because the confession is the point, because the writing, the slow, deliberate, words-on-paper examination of the interior of a love you are living inside produces exactly the quality of clarity that Sévigné's letters produced for her. You cannot see the love you are inside clearly from inside it. The writing gives you the distance that the geography gave her, and in the distance, even the manufactured distance of writing rather than speaking, something becomes visible that the proximity keeps covered.
I want to close with the image that has stayed with me since I first read the correspondence. Not the letters themselves, the room. Sévigné's apartment in Paris, the writing table, the paper, the ink, the seal. The specific, private, entirely unglamorous labor of sitting down each time the post was going out and trying to say something true. Not something clever, not something witty, not the version of herself that the salons of Paris received, but the version that was actually present in the room with the paper and the ink and the absence of the person she was writing to. She was not performing in those letters. Or rather, she was performing because she was constitutionally incapable of not being brilliant, and she knew perfectly well that these letters might survive her. But the performance was built on top of an actual attempt at honesty. The wit was real, and underneath the wit was something that most people do not bring to their love. The genuine, sometimes painful, never quite completed project of trying to understand what the love actually is. She sat at that table for 25 years. She found in those years that proximity had kept invisible, that the love she had for her daughter was a real thing, separate from herself, capable of existing independently of whether Françoise was in the room, that it did not require the beloved's presence in order to be itself, that it was, in the end, in the letters, in the distance that had forced her to examine it, genuinely about Françoise, and not only about the self that could not imagine being without her. That is the gift of the letters, not the brilliant prose, the honest looking, the willingness to sit at the table and ask again and again, in the absence of easy answers, what exactly is this love, and is it doing what I want it to do? That question is available to anyone. The table is wherever you put the pen down. Here is the question Madame de Sévigné leaves us with today. Not from Paris, not from the 17th century or the brilliant salons or the letters that filled 17 volumes in the edition most scholars use. From the room, from the honest moment after the person you love has left and you are sitting with the quality of the love itself, not the performance of it, not the history of it, but the thing that is actually present when the other person is not. What is there? How much of it is genuinely for them, organized around their good, their freedom, their capacity to be fully themselves, including when fully themselves means being elsewhere? And how much of it is for you, organized around your need, your coherence, your sense of yourself as necessary and loved? You do not have to have clean answers. Sévigné did not. She wrote letters for 25 years trying to find them. What she found instead was something more valuable, the habit of asking, the ongoing, honest, sometimes uncomfortable examination of the interior of the love she was living inside. That examination is the practice. The question is the beginning of it. And the beginning, with the pen on the paper, in the room, in the honest distance from the person you most love, is available right now. Leave that in the comments, because naming what you found in the honest looking at what the love actually is the beginning of what Sévigné called, in one of her most remarkable letters, the difficult joy of loving someone as they actually are, rather than as you need them to be. I'll see you in the next one.